If you're at war, the entire country goes to war. And, you know, it is true. What Jim's saying is, yeah, there's still so much garbage out there every day. And now a lot of the more extreme Trumpists are doing everything they can to try to defend the president and his extraordinarily slow start, trying to pretend that the intel committees, or that the intel community, his own intel community, warned him starting in January about this coming pandemic. It could be a pandemic. It could be very dangerous. The Department of HHS Secretary Azar was trying to see him for 2 weeks, and the president wouldn't see him. And when he finally saw him in the middle of January to talk about the pandemic, the president only wanted to talk about vaping. And that continued on throughout January. There were other people in the White House taking meetings, trying to figure out what they could do. And one staff member said, we just couldn't get him to focus on that. And so they're going that direction. I can tell you, for me personally, I got attacked by somebody from a website. I will not mention. Why give people, you know, why promote any website that spreads lies? But I was attacked along with somebody on Fox News, believe it or not, for wrecking the economy, because I was quoting the Imperial College study that suggested up to 2.2 million Americans could die. And then, of course, after that, the president on Monday, what did he do? He quoted the same exact numbers. So on Friday, I'm the bad guy for wrecking the economy, for promoting the Imperial College study, which is the gold standard according to people inside the White House. And by the way, people inside the White House were looking at the Imperial College study. But that was the attack on Friday. And then on Monday, they moved the attack to something else because, of course, that's blown up. But we've seen this sort of nonsense in politics for 3.5 years with the president's most rabid supporters. And also there are, of course, some useful idiots for Russia who are out there doing the same thing. So there still is, even when we're talking about a pandemic that the president's own people say could kill millions of people, but now they believe maybe 100 to 240,000 people, you still have all of this nonsense going on out there when so much is at risk, when the president's own people are saying that. And my God, we're going to get to this story later as well. But Dr. Fauci now has to get this. No. Dr. Fauci is now having to get protection because of the number of death threats that he has received for doing what? Trying to save as many American lives as he can. This is the sickness of certain extreme, rabid supporters online of Donald Trump. Certainly not everybody, certainly not the majority of people, but there is this rabid strain. We've had Democrats talk about it in Bernie Sanders supporters. We certainly have it here with Donald Trump supporters. But can you imagine the man who's doing more to save you and your family's lives having to get security, having to get protection from U.S. Marshals because he's getting death threats from people who think that this is a conspiracy to bring down Donald Trump? It's madness.
For so many reasons, everybody needs to get on the same page.
It's madness.
With the scientists, the top scientists.
I mean,
what is coming at us.
Yeah, and if the president now appears to be listening to his scientists, that should be a signal that supporters should. But Jonathan, I want to back up really quickly, and just so this isn't a partisan strike at governors. We've talked about Republican governors from Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, 3 states where I spent most of my life. But we can talk about Democrats as well. I mean, again, to make the bigger point that this is a national issue. We are at war. You cannot trust governors. You can't trust mayors. You can't trust senators to protect people. If you're at war and you're the president and you get the intel information in January, you have to take the lead. I mean, we've talked about Republicans saying reckless things. You can go back to late February, early March. Bill de Blasio, remember Bill de Blasio getting hammered for going to his gym as they were shutting down New York City? Bill de Blasio telling people to go out and do things. Andrew Cuomo, who, yeah, he's doing great now, but back, you know, a month or so ago, he was actually pushing back against Bill de Blasio and the stay-at-home order. And, you know, we've got tweets, we've got receipts. And my point here is not that these people aren't doing a great job now, just like I hope Ron DeSantis starts doing a great job now for the sake of the people in their states. But just that this can't be a patchwork approach. I know people get sick and tired of me saying that, but I've been saying it. You can't have a patchwork approach to a pandemic. It needs to be nationalized. And for whatever reason, the president wants to say he's a wartime president. He wants to declare war against this pandemic, but will not take charge of it. He's scared to take charge of it, and it's caused a lot of chaos across this country in our approach to beating this virus.
And Joe, you know how much Bill de Blasio's gym routine personally offends me. But yes, we are seeing this, that when it's left in the hands of state houses and city halls, we get a variety of results. And yes, certainly Governor Cuomo is getting a lot of laudatory evaluations now, but New York was in some ways slower to move on some of the stay-at-home guidance did not move as quickly as, say, California and Washington State. Governor Inslee and Newsom were quicker on some of that. You know, certainly de Blasio is a good example where, you know, he for a while kept New York City public schools open, you know, pointing to the need to feed underprivileged children and give children of rescue workers, and of course just the value of education. But it came a certain point where that was untenable. That's acceptable. What I think most health experts feel was unacceptable is that last weekend he let the restaurants and bars stay open and even encouraged New Yorkers to go kind of have one last night out at their favorite bar, which of course at that point, with the virus spreading rapidly across the city, was just a recipe for disaster. But President Trump here, you are right. He has not wanted to fully embrace this. As much as he is now declaring himself a wartime president, it's only in the last few days where he has stopped downplaying the severity of the virus, that he's leveled with the American people as to how bad the toll could be, how many people could die, and asking them to sort of batten down the hatches and prepare themselves for what could be a terrible 2 weeks, as he said yesterday. But he's still not fully mobilizing the force of the government in order to do that. The United States government has ordered more body bags to have delivered, but has still not really stepped up its production, making private companies produce the necessary number of ventilators and masks. And masks in particular, as a final point, is going to be a real focus these next couple of days. The president mused from the briefing room podium yesterday that perhaps Americans, he wasn't mandating it, but perhaps Americans should wear masks or scarves. And we saw the city of Los Angeles last night say that encouraging all citizens to wear them were they to step outside at all.
Yeah, you know, Mika, the Wall Street Journal this morning in their opinion pages talk about the importance of these antibody tests. We've fallen behind in the diagnostic tests. We've got to catch up. And if we get to the point where we're doing 1 million a day, 2 million a day, where if you want a test, you can get a test, that's great. Still can't do it even in Donald Trump's own Palm Beach County, where you've got 1.4 million people and a couple of thousand people are the only ones that have had tests, 300,000 according to the Palm Beach Post a couple of days ago, desperate for those tests and can't get it. But you have those diagnostic tests that are so important. But as the Wall Street Journal was writing about this morning in their opinion pages, it's also important that we get ahead of the game on the antibody tests. That means if somebody has the coronavirus, and we're all starting. I know you probably know somebody who's had the coronavirus and gotten through it. We know a lot of friends that have had the coronavirus
people who have died
and gotten through it. There are a lot of people that have gotten through it that don't even know they had it. If you have a test, and we can get everybody to take that test to see if you have those antibodies, if you do, then most doctors, most scientists believe that you're immune to the disease for at least a year. You can go back to work. You can go back to school. You can go back to restaurants. You can start your life back. So instead of 5 more trillion-dollar bailout bills, why don't we focus on where we should have focused from the very beginning, and that is testing. Germany's ahead of us again on testing. Other countries are ahead of us on this testing, according to the Wall Street Journal, on this testing for immunity. Let's focus on that. Get the immunity tests out there. get the diagnostic tests, of course, out there. That's how we're going to open up our society fastest. And Mr. President, you need to take control of that. If you really want the economy to open up more quickly, if you want to be able to trace this disease, track it down, and figure out what states are ready to open up, what cities need to stay locked down, do the diagnostic. I mean, even in New York State. I know, I lived in upstate New York for a while. Big difference between upstate New York and New York City. If you have these tests, I mean, one of my friends in upstate New York thinks he had the coronavirus. He takes the antibody test. It ends up that he's got the antibodies. He can go back to work that day. That's the key here. We've got to do better on testing. We failed miserably once.
We lost 2 months.
We lost 2 months. Let's get this right, and we can get people back into their lives, back to school, back to work, and get America running again.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.